So we're going to change topics now. We're going to talk about closing. Some of the main keys to closing are to be confident in what you're doing, to be confident in the Cutco product, to drop down slowly, to be extremely patient with the customer, to use the manual, and to memorize the close. Now your confidence should come from everything else that we just talked about when we went through the Cutco product and how great it is and why it's so great. We talked about all that stuff in one of our earlier sessions. And if you listen to that and you still feel that you want more confidence, talk to your manager, go field training, keep listening to these audios. You want to drop down slowly and be patient. You want to give the customer time to think. When you are closing and you ask the customer whether or not they'd like to buy, you need to pause and say nothing. This is one of the best things that my very first manager taught me. So when you say, would you like to go ahead and do that today? Or would you like to go ahead and get the Homemaker Plus 8 and get the Super Shears for free? Or whatever your closing line is, when you say that line, you want to pause and give them time to think. Because you may be nervous in that moment. And you may be thinking, oh my God, they don't like it. I don't know what's going to happen here. And what they might be thinking, you have no way of knowing what they're thinking until they open their mouths. What they're most likely doing, if they're not saying anything, they're sitting there thinking, can I afford this? Would I use all of these? Is this one the best one for me? How much money do we owe? What's in the bank right now? Do I want to do this on a 5-pay? Can I pay for this all at once? They're thinking things like that. And if they're trying to think their way through that and you start talking, then it gets confusing. It makes it hard for them to think, and it makes it hard for them to say either yes or no. And so remember, a confused mind says no. And remember, the most important thing that you can do in terms of closing is to follow the manual and memorize the close. You memorize the close for the same reason that you memorize the leads approach. You want to be professional, you want to be confident, and you want to look like you know what you're doing. If at any point in the appointment you want to look like you know what you're doing, it's when you're closing and when you're asking for leads. Now, the easiest time to handle an objection is before it comes up. When we go over service calls, we're going to go into a lot more detail on how to do that. And almost everything that you do in a service call can also be done in a demo in terms of the things that are designed to handle objections before they come up. So we'll talk about that in more detail in a later session. One simple example is to plant seeds about how expensive Cutco is. So for example, when you say that Cutco does over $200 million in business annually, or whatever the number is, right now at the time of this recording, it's about $200 million annually. You might say, and because our sets are so unbelievably expensive, that $200 million, we only have to sell like 4 or 5 of them a year to get to that number. Or when you're on the features and benefits page and you're talking about the thermoresin handle, the nickel silver rivets, the double D edge, you can say something like, can you imagine how much money they're putting into this product? Or when you go over the guarantee, you can say, can you imagine how expensive it has to be for something to have a guarantee like this? The whole idea is that you're building up the value of the product. And your enthusiasm throughout the presentation, your enthusiasm for the Cutco product is going to be key here. Another thing that's probably a good idea is for you to use your Cutco. Now, you may or may not cook, but even if you don't, get a friend who does and spend half an hour using the knives with that person. Let them show you how to use them. Or compare them to whatever knives you had before you started working here. I know before I started working for Cutco, of course as a college student, I had absolute junk knives in my little kitchen in our apartment in Washington, D.C. And they were so bad that one time I was cutting something and the glue, the cheap glue in the handle on this, junk knife, the glue had melted and the blade came completely detached from the handle while I was trying to cut something. And I used that story with customers. Whenever I did the junk knife section, I used that story for quite a while. So be excited, be enthusiastic. Memorize the close. Just like memorizing the leads approach, it does not take long. If you have to choose which one to memorize first, memorize the leads approach first. But you should be able to memorize both of them in about half an hour. And that one half an hour could probably double your average order. It could increase it by at least 30 to 50%, depending on how well you're doing the other parts of your appointment. Now, first off, we just went over this briefly, but the most important thing you can do to close, the secret to selling Cutco, is to use the manual and memorize your close. You need to be able to express confidence and enthusiasm, and it's hard to do that when you're constantly checking the prices and realizing that you skipped a section. You also want to remember that Henckels is a good product. Wusthof is a good product. Shun is a good product. So whichever brand of knives you're using to compare Cutco to, these are good knives. Don't trash them. Don't say, yeah, well, there's this set of Wusthof that's not really that good, and it's really overpriced, and that's why they charge this much money for it. You want to build it up. Because Wusthof is our competition, but it's also what we're going to be comparing ourselves to. And our prices are better. And our product is better in pretty much every way. That doesn't mean that Wusthof is a bad set of knives. And if you make it look like you're comparing us to junk, what does that make us look like? And not only that, if you're talking to someone who knows anything about knives, they know that Wusthof is a good brand of knives. So just be straight with people. And also remember how much better ours is. So get excited about the Wusthof or the Shun or the Henckels, but get even more excited about the Cutco. I once ran into a customer, no kidding, who had a high-end set of Henckels, and every 8 years or so, she would throw the set away and buy a brand new one. Because eventually those types of knives can get to a point where they can't really be sharpened anymore. They have to be reground. Now, this was someone who was obviously really into cooking and cooked a ton. This is not exactly common. And I've also run into people who've had Henckels or Wusthof or Shun, who've had them for 8 or 10 or 12 years, even 15 years, and they're still sharp and they're still good knives. Now, they don't have the double D edge. They have to sharpen them way more than you have to sharpen Cutco, and they're not guaranteed. They're not American made, and they pay way more for them. But just remember that they're high quality knives. Now, the key to presenting the price well is not to talk too fast. So talk slowly, look the customer in the eye, and check their responses to make sure they're following what you're saying. If there's something they don't understand, explain it as many times as you need to. Remember, a confused mind says no. Customers who do not understand what you're offering them will say no. And you've got to remember, even though the presentation is all old information to you, it's new information to them. And there's a lot of information. I've even had the most qualified, most intensely interested customers, the kind who tell you over the phone, I definitely want to know more about Cutco because I've heard about it from my friends. I've even had customers at this level get confused if I talk too fast and don't check to make sure they're following everything I'm saying. So talk slowly during the close. Don't sound like an idiot. Don't say, have you ever priced high quality cutlery before? But your customers need to be able to understand exactly what you're saying. Just say, have you ever priced high quality cutlery before? When you're talking about a set, or when you're talking about particular items that come in a set, turn to the pages that feature that set or those items and point to the items that are included in the set. Pause between each item that's included in the set. Look your customer in the eye for confirmation that they understand what you're saying. Pause between Basic Homemaker and Homemaker Plus 8, or between Homemaker Plus 8 and Signature Set, or between Signature and Ultimate. If for any reason you feel that they don't understand what you're saying, or that they missed a point, just cover it again in different language. So for example, if you say Basic Homemaker and Homemaker Plus 8, and they give you a blank look, like they don't know what you're talking about, you want to say something like, these two, you point to the two sets, are the same set, except this one right here has 8 of our table knives. When you quote the price, especially when quoting several options, such as the trade-in specials and the payment options, write everything down. Write Homemaker plus 8 with free shears. And then write the price next to it. And then next to that, write the payment options once you've showed the payment options. Never, ever, ever be lazy and just show them the manual. The manual is not for them, it is for you. Now, let's talk about dropping down and handling objections. You want to remember the basic objection cycle. The first step is to repeat the objection in the form of a question. Oh, so you're saying it's too many knives? Or, oh, you're saying you can't afford it. Say, I understand that it's expensive. Or, I understand that you just had your kitchen remodeled. Or whatever it is that was the objection, you just repeat it, reword it. That's step 2. Step 3, respond to the objection. You say, and? No, try not to say but. When you say but, you're negating everything you just said. So, I understand you just had your kitchen remodeled, but you say, and, it sounds better. It sounds more like you're really appreciating and understanding their objection. I understand that it's very expensive and you just got your kitchen remodeled, and I think I may have a solution for you. And then you present the solution and you ask for the sale. That's the 4th step, is to ask for the sale. Now, the basic overall principle here is that you want to be dropping down slowly. And dropping down itself and going slowly by themselves. These are both ways of actually handling objections. Here's what I mean. When you do the demo, if you do it right, if you read the manual, cut the penny, cut the rope, cut the leather, the customer is going to want Cutco. The customer is going to like Cutco. Now try to imagine something that you really like. Something that you want to buy but do not own. Whether that's a certain piece of clothing, a set of headphones or speakers, a new car, whatever it is. Try to imagine that you're in the store that sells that particular item. Now try to imagine that you're not just in that store, you're not just like walking through it and coming in from the parking lot to the mall on your way to meet someone in the food court, but you actually spend time in that store just kind of hanging out. And you're hanging out in this section that has that thing that you want. In fact, I dare you to try this. Try going to that section of the store and hanging out and not buying that thing that you want. And also try to imagine that every few minutes that you spent in that store, either the price of the item was reduced, which is what we do with the trade-in special, or you found out that you could put it on interest-free payments, right, which is what we do with the 5-pay, or you found out that if you get it today, you get free items with it, or you found out that there's another version of the same thing that has all the benefits you want but actually costs less. And try to imagine that the more time you spent there, the more this kept happening. It's one thing for you to be walking quickly through the store and glance and notice that something's on sale. It's another thing for you to be sitting around, staring at it, thinking about whether or not you'd use it, thinking about whether or not you could afford it. And that is why we drop down slowly. And remember that sometimes the customer really means the objection, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the objection is, again, it's just part of the conversation process that we have with salespeople. Most sales are not made until the customer's had a chance to say no several times. It's just like when someone asks, how are you doing? You say, I'm doing fine. It's just like with leads. The customer needs to really feel like they bought it, and sometimes that means they say no to it up front. Sometimes they just want to see if they can get a better deal. And so sometimes we offer them a better deal. So drop down slowly. Be patient. Take your time. All right, now let's talk about some specific objections. First, sometimes customers say that there's too many knives. If the customer thinks that there are too many knives in the set, then you didn't build value in the set as a whole. You need to understand that the sets are the best deals for our customers for 2 reasons. Number 1, the price. If you piece out a Homemaker, it costs significantly more than if you buy it all at once. If you piece it out, If you look at the items in the Homemaker Plus 8 and you add up how much they cost piece by piece, it's $11.42, over $100 more than it costs if you buy them all at once. And remember, if you're adding it up, you have to include the sharpener and the cutting board. Now, if you add shears to that, which we often give for free, it's $12.37. If you add kitchen tools and shears, it's $14.06, over $250 more than they're getting if they buy just the Homemaker Plus 8 and they get the kitchen tools and the super shears for free. And even if they don't get those items for free, they save $100 with 0 discounts. The set's already discounted because it comes in a set. And if you want to see that math, you can check that document titled The Value of the Sets, and it shows how the math works out. The second reason that sets are a better deal for customers is they represent a better value, not just in price, but number one, the sets are specifically designed to have the right number of tools for the most common jobs in the kitchen. If the customer buys a trimmer and a paring knife, what are they going to use to carve a turkey? To carve a large ham? A large steak? A brisket? A watermelon? A coconut? A cantaloupe? Acorn squash? I know this. I never cooked before I got Cutco because I was a college student. I remember thinking that the carver was ridiculously long and that no one would ever use that until I had to carve a ham that was about, maybe 11 to 14 inches wide. I tried to use the petite carver, and as I tried to cut large slices, the handle basically went into the meat because the knife wasn't big enough. Now, second, Cutco knives are made to last 7 to 10 years on average without seriously going dull. When a customer buys only a few pieces, they are the only tools that get used. I do a lot of service calls. The only customers I find who are not satisfied with their Cutco, this is extremely rare, but when I do see it, it's people who buy 1 or 2 pieces. They use them for every single job in the kitchen, including things that they're not designed for. They wear them out after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then they wonder what happened. Now, I always sell more knives to these customers once I explain to them what the tools are designed to be used for and why they haven't lasted as long. These people upgrade to sets in the long run, which is more expensive for them. Now, you want the sets to be the forefront of what you're selling. Cutco is great, but the only thing better than Cutco is Cutco in a set. Now, you want to have this confidence in the sets. That doesn't mean that you should be against selling them by piece. Just realize that the sets are the best value, and have that conviction and have that belief, and you will sell more of them. Now remember, the Homemaker is a basic set. It is not a deluxe set for specialty cooking. It's specifically designed for the average household, whether they love cooking or not. The Ultimate, the Signature, those are more specialty sets for customers who love to cook, or for people who just want to have the best in class. Some reps even call the Homemaker the basic set. They don't even call it the Homemaker. They say this is the basic set. Mrs. Jones, this is the Homemaker. It's one of our basic sets. It's designed to provide the minimum number of tools without duplication or repetition. And that's just the truth. The best way to build value in the set is by addressing the objection before it arises. Now, there's 2 main ways to do this. The first is to use the word set as often as possible. The first tool in your Homemaker set is the paring knife. The next tool in your Homemaker set is the trimmer. The set comes with. The more you say set, the more you associate the word Cutco to the word set, both for yourself and for the customer, the more it just makes sense that that's how they come. When people go to the store to buy knives, they almost always buy a set. When people go to the store to buy tools, they buy sets. Second, cover the names and uses in detail. This is especially important with the Homemaker tools that are not included in the galley: the butcher knife, the large carver, and the carving fork. Paint a picture of them using these tools several times a year. Ask if they like to barbecue. You like to barbecue? This knife is perfect for you. And then hand them the butcher knife. Talk about how they'll use it to separate frozen hot dog and hamburgers, to cut spare ribs. Mention that even though the carver's not used all the time, it is used at the holidays. And that if they use it 2 or 3 times a year, over the course of the next 10, 20, 30 years. That's a lot of uses. Remember, you're not selling them knives for today. You're not selling them knives for next week. You're selling them knives for the rest of their life. That's what the sets are for. If they still say that it's too many tools, ask which tools they think they'd use the least, then sell them on those tools. Be excited and enthusiastic about the individual tools they think they don't need. Show them that they'll need it. This is especially important if they name any of the galley tools, because if they say they hate the trimmer, they say they hate the spreader, you want to be able to show them how they're going to use it and the value that comes with that piece, because those two pieces are included in most of the sets. And there's a reason for that, because they're two of the most commonly used pieces that we make. And they should be very, very easy to sell to customers, to show customers the value of those two pieces. So let's talk about the next objection. Too expensive. This means one of two things. It either means that you didn't build enough value, and that's if they mean that it's too expensive for knives, as in it just plain costs more than it's worth. Or it means that you need to drop down, because it means it's more money than they want to spend for them. So it's either too much money for knives, or it's too much money for me. And those are two very different objections. If they're saying it's too much money for knives, then you need to do a better demo and go back over the Cutco section and get more product conviction. In other words, you need to think about things like just remember that your customers are spending thousands of dollars on basic kitchen items. The refrigerators are often at least as expensive than a homemaker, or even more so, and a refrigerator only lasts 10 years. Remodeling a kitchen, something simple like getting a countertop replaced, that easily costs more than a homemaker, often more than an Ultimate. I've been in homes that have spent $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on a kitchen remodel. It's absolutely no stretch for someone to pay $1,000 for a basic set of knives that will last them for the rest of their lives and into their children's lives. That's not just something that's true. That's something that you have to believe with conviction. You have to show that to your customer by your enthusiasm with the product. More commonly, though, too expensive means it's more than I want to spend today, or it's more than I have right now. Now, here's a great way to handle that objection. In fact, this is one of my favorite ways to handle this objection. She says it's too expensive. See, Mrs. Jones, I totally understand. It's definitely not cheap. You know, a lot of times when I'm in this situation, I'm trying to decide whether or not to buy something. I ask myself three things. Do I like it? Will I use it? And can I afford it? And then when I've answered those three questions, it helps me decide whether or not I should get something. So, Mrs. Jones, do you like Cutco? And what do you think she's going to say? Of course, she says yes. Mrs. Jones, would you use Cutco? She'll say yes. And sometimes I'll press her, especially if I know she cooks a lot. Would you use it like occasionally, or would you use it like all the time? Mrs. Jones, if I showed you a way that you could afford Cutco, do you think you might be able to get it today? Now, you gauge the reaction to that last question very carefully. If you've done everything right, if you've built rapport, if you've shown them the value of Cutco, 95+% of customers are going to get real curious about that question. They'll say something like, what do you mean? Or, maybe, but they say it with that interest in their voice. Now let's talk about the next objection. I'll buy it later. This one is particularly common when it's combined with, if I get anything, I'm only getting everything. And then the customer says that they only want the homemaker, they only want the Ultimate, they only want the Cutco kitchen, they only want one of the big items, and they don't want to buy anything smaller. The challenge with that one is that when you're dropping down, your enthusiasm has to go up, and we've already talked about that. But you need to learn, when you have someone who's completely sold on the homemaker, and they're really excited about it, you need to learn to unsell them on the homemaker after you've spent time handling objections and it's too much money and you want to drop down. And they start saying things like, well, I'll buy it later. Here's a great way to do this. What you do is you point to the pieces that aren't in the set down, and you say, you know what? I think I have a set that might be even better for you, because it'll save you a lot of money and it'll take out the pieces that I think you'll use the least. So if you're going from the homemaker to the galley, You might say something like, after you've handled objections on the Homemaker, you've explained the 5-pay, you've talked about the Super Shears for free, the first call special. After you've handled those objections and you're deciding it's time to go from Homemaker to Galley, you might say something like, Mrs. Jones, I have the perfect solution for you. It's called our Galley set, and it's even better for you than the Homemaker set. It's even better. It's called the Galley set, and it takes the 3 least used pieces from the Homemaker, the 3 tools that you will use the least, which are also 3 of the most expensive tools in that set. So you save a lot of money. You only lose 3 things that are the ones you're going to be using the least. And now you get 6 table knives instead of 8, but you still get everything else that you want. Let me show you what it comes with. And then you close them on the Galley. I used to sell a ton of Galley sets this way. Now, remember, when the customer says they'll buy it later, I know it may be tempting to accept that it is a sale, but realize that it is not a sale. I have not once in my entire career had a buy later become a purchase. In fact, I took a straw poll at a team meeting a few weeks ago, and I estimated that about 1 in 1,000 demos, a buy later becomes a purchase. You are much better off selling a customer a trimmer now than a promise for a Homemaker tomorrow. Now, the other thing you want to do is just ask them why they want to buy it later, because I can give you more information about the objection. There's a few different reasons that they could be giving you. The first is they might be waiting on input from either from their spouse, from their husband, or from their wife. The question here is, are you talking to the right person? You want to be sitting in front of the person who cooks in the family. Sometimes this is the husband. More often it is the wife. If you're in front of the person who cooks, you want to say, you want to talk to your husband, right? I can definitely understand that. What most of my customers in this situation do is go ahead and fill out an order, and you can try it out for 15 days. If you decide you don't like it, then you can send it back, no questions asked. That's part of the forever guarantee. That way we can still lock in the first call special for you, and it's still only, and then you name the price. Would you like to do that? And a way to handle this objection before it comes up is when you're going over the guarantee, when you get to that 15-day section where they can return it in 15 days, you say, a lot of times we call this the husband clause. Because that way, if you're looking at it and your husband's not home, you can go ahead and get it, and then he can see it, and then the two of you can try it out for 15 days and see how you like it. And if they persist, if they say, no, I absolutely have to talk to him, ask if they can call their spouse. I once had a woman do that. She called her husband, and he was like, yeah, I really want it. And she comes back and says, yeah, he said it's fine. In fact, I've had that more than once. And one time I had a wife do that, and it was like a $4,500 order. And she came back, and she said, well, he just spent about the same amount of money on a tractor, so he couldn't say no. Now, if the answer is an absolute firm no, and they won't call their spouse or they can't call their spouse, ask if you can reschedule for a time when both of them will be home to see the demo. Realize that anyone who doesn't see Cutco, who doesn't feel it, doesn't see it cut the penny, doesn't see what it is, it can be very, very hard for them to be sold on the idea of the product. That's why we sell it through demonstration. That's why we don't sell Cutco in stores. Our pair of scissors in a store doesn't look any more special than any other pair of scissors. It just looks like it's more expensive. But when people see that it cuts the penny, it makes a huge difference. If they tell you they're waiting on a paycheck, that can be another reason that they want to buy it later. Then you tell them that you'll post-date the order, which is just like post-dating a check. And if they ask why, say that you need the signature on the order, and you'd much rather do it today than have to come back out and get a signature later. Lastly, they might say something like they want time to think about it. This is a great objection. It means that they want it, but they need more time. That's why we close slowly. So it's fine for customers to want time to think about it. What we want is for that time to be spent sitting in front of you talking about whether or not they want to buy it. I want time to think about it usually hides some other objection. This can be any one of the other ones we've discussed. I need to talk to my wife. I can't decide if I would use all the tools, or it's too many. You want to try to find out which one lays behind. I want some time to think about it. Usually they'll tell you what lays behind this objection without your asking. If they don't ask, just say, so you want some time to think about it, right? Well, tell me a little bit about what you're thinking. If they don't respond to that, just go back to the 3 questions. We'll either close the sale or the true objection will come out and you'll be able to address it. Last objection. I don't have the money now, or some version of I can't afford it. Here's the crazy thing about this one. It's almost always not true. Now, if you go over to someone's house and you find out that her husband has been unemployed for 3 years, then maybe she really can't afford to get something. But when you consider what $200 a month really is to the type of customers that you should be seeing, to your married homeowners over the age of 25 or over the age of 30, or those types of people that your manager is telling you to see, $200 a month, or a little bit more than that, is the price of a homemaker plus 8. A family of 4 can spend that on groceries in 1 week. Even if they can't afford that. We have sets that are smaller. We have 3-piece specials. You put a 3-piece special on a 3-pay, depending on what they're getting, it could be $50, $60, $80, $100 a month for 3 months for something that they're going to have for the next 40 years that they're going to be using every single day. Oh, look, it's not that the customer is lying to you. It's that you need to find a way to make it affordable for them. When you start out with the homemaker plus 8, and they say they can't afford it, you show them the 5-pay. And they say they can't afford that. You show them the trade-in special. And you do this all slowly and hailing their objections. The kiss of death, though, is when they say they can't afford it and you just say, oh, I guess that means because you can't afford this offer that I'm making you right now, that you can't afford anything today. And that's when you start to give up. And that's what you can't allow to happen if you want to be successful here. Think about it this way. What would your customers do if their refrigerator broke? Right? Would Mr. Jones dig a hole in the backyard and fill it with ice? Or would he have one delivered by the end of the week, if not the end of the day? Remember, we covered this in another audio. A refrigerator's $400, $800, $1,200, $2,000. What's a hot water heater cost? Between $700 and $1,500 or more, right? What would your customers do if the hot water heater broke? Right? How many cold showers would Mrs. Jones take? All right? That's the kind of thing where she'd say, have it fixed by tonight, or we're staying in a hotel. People have money. You just have to have the product conviction and the patience, both to show them that Cutco is A, worth the money, and B, that there's a way that they can afford it. Anyone who has a job can afford some kind of Cutco. So I hope you've enjoyed this message on closing. Thank you.